You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. You're here with me, Nikki Sims, and my co-host, Andrew Jackson, on the Beast Over Burden podcast. What's up, Andrew?
Howdy.
Howdy. So, Beast Over Burden, that title is actually really meaningful to me because being a beast is fun. It also means that you are very useful in life and you are not a burden. We also are approaching how to make training really applicable so it doesn't feel like a burden, but it's more about helping you feel like a beast. And we recently talked about something along that vein in the competition world, in the International Barbell Federation. We had Jordan on to talk about what it's like to compete and what this new federation is like and why it exists. And my audio components were not working very well. And so I didn't get to share as much about competing, but we thought there are still some open questions we could speak to today about that competition, including what you're going to get out of it when you sign up, and maybe a few more stories on what it's like to be on the platform and be judged.
Yeah, it definitely seems like we were missing a perspective. Talking to Jordan, always awesome, and he is so intense of a competitor. I can remember one time talking to him about his approach to playing StarCraft, a video game. And he would be paying attention to like the pixel level of detail on the screen, as he's playing the game. And so super intense guy, super competitive. And we're talking about lifting 700, 800 pounds, bones getting crushed, forearms getting bent. And, that's a great perspective. And I, was thinking after the interview, we probably want to get a little bit of a other perspective, maybe from
those of us in the middle of the bell curve.
Yeah, probably more of our listeners and competitors fit within the category. Not that, we do have people in the community that are lifting that kind of weight, but most people are not. And yet I think there's still a lot of value from competing and particularly getting your perspective on what your experience has been like competing, what that's meant to you, how it's influenced your training, and how that's evolved over time as you've gone from a new lifter to an experienced lifter to a master's lifter, you might call yourself now.
I think I am indeed a master's lifter.
And, basically expand the tent of IBF competitors that might be wondering whether this would be something for them.
Well, I never played sports very well in school. And so I never really connected well with that kind of competition in team sports. Like in middle school, I did volleyball and softball. And then in high school, I did like one day of cross country, immediately decided that was not for me. I endured a basketball season in my junior year, hated that as well. But I really enjoyed time in the gym, and that eventually brought me to CrossFit, which is where I first started dipping my toes into competition.
Would you call yourself a painfully average athlete like Matt?
Probably way more. I don't know if it's been as painful, but definitely maybe more average.
I feel like I have to out Matt a little bit here. Have I talked about this already on the podcast? I think I may have. It's the first reverse Reynolds exaggeration I've experienced.
Oh, right. Saying he's painfully average, and in fact, he's not.
I thought for years Matt was a painfully average athlete, in his own words. And come to find out, just a few weeks ago while we were in Vegas, that he had depending on the device he tested it on, between a 35 and a 40-inch vertical.
Which is amazing.
It's like off the charts high.
And like knowing him now when it looks just really painful to like walk around, I'm like, nah.
Well, yeah. And that his brother, Chris, who's been on the podcast, also had a similar vertical and dunking like on a regular basis.
Yep.
And so I just want to check in. When you say not an athlete, you didn't secretly have like a 30-inch vertical. And
oh no, it was probably like 5-inch vertical. Not very good. And I didn't ever do very well in CrossFit competitions because I don't run. And there are many other things that I wasn't good at. But when I found that I could just do barbell training, and like I've even done some Olympic lifting competitions and those were mediocre. But when I found out that I could compete in the deadlift, I was all in because I found the genre that I was a bit more than average. I found something that I felt special doing because I'm a strong deadlifter. There are a lot of women who are stronger than I am, but that was my special superpower. And this was at a time like 10 years ago when powerlifting wasn't as popular. I would win meets. There's no way I would win a meet now, but I really enjoyed winning meets back in the day.
Okay. So the hardware and standing on the podium was a motivator, big motivator for you?
Oh, yeah. I loved it. I would have fun picking out my singlets. I would be super excited with the rest of my friends who were there competing. I did it in Albuquerque when I owned a CrossFit gym. We had a big group of us, all of us focused on barbell training, and we called that group the Brute Squad, like from The Princess Bride. We would go down to like small towns in New Mexico and stay there and compete in powerlifting meets. And it was really fun because we would do pretty well.
I'm trying to imagine like the powerlifting meets back in the day in Washington were usually in parts of town that were a little questionable at like some sort of like repurposed men's club or
dingy
hotel.
hotels. Yeah, exactly.
Dingy hotel like lobby, lots of carpet everywhere that gets covered in, you know, baby powder and
yes,
fluids from God knows
chalk.
What. It smells.
It was so fun. And then as time went on, well, I moved to San Francisco and continued in the barbell world, and the meets were different there. And we would go to Sacramento, and there's a huge lifting community in Sacramento. So a big group of us would go to parts of Northern California to compete. And that's when they were in really great lifting gyms. That was different. And it was similar, except the smell was more potent.
Yeah.
Lots of knee sleeve smell. I remember that fondly on meet days.
And you were also part of the, similar to Jordan, because I think you were actually the poster child, if I remember correctly, for the 2015 national event.
Oh, yeah.
You were like one of the
pictures
of you like fist pumping from the 2014
I think I was on the photo
meet, which was
back before singlets were required.
It was a national meet, but only one location, if I remember correctly.
You would remember more than me. But yeah, I always took the opportunity to compete in those meets. Yeah, it was so much fun. Because it, you know, being in that community where we were all over, that was a really great opportunity for us to get together. So that was part of it. You know, the shared experience of working up to a competition that we would get to talk about afterwards, and it becomes like a huge point of conversation for, you know, at least a month to come. And even in the remote online environment, it's still a shared experience where you're just like, what do you think you're going to get? What are your attempts going to be? How did it go? And it's that, you know, being on the roller coaster together for your own experience, like when you actually have that one day where you complete your attempts. And I've done it so many times now that I know there are some days when it all goes really, really well. And you're just like, man, that was an excellent peaking period. I had a great training cycle that led up to this, hit PRs or, you know, satisfied my objective, which might have been 9 for 9 or 7 for 9, whatever it was. And then some days where, you know, you were not recovered, or when I was not recovered and the strategy did not work and it was a really tough day, like the lifts were not there. And that is also a powerful emotion, but it was never enough to make me stop. It was another fun emotion along the way to keep reinvesting in training. And then I even went on to compete in jiu-jitsu for similar reasons, is I get to express myself against other people, and I retired undefeated.
Would you say that your training program for that era, like that 2010, 2012 to 2020, like 8 years or so, was primarily organized around peaking for meets?
Yeah, I would compete once or twice a year. So it was always something that I was recovering from or looking forward to. So it was definitely within my training calendar on the regular. And at that level of advancement, you really did, like, I couldn't compete much more than twice a year.
Just because of the taper and then a crash after.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to get a couple more pounds on the bar.
Right.
I'm not able to get 20-pound PRs. So that was a bit more strategic. And I was working with Matt for some of that cycle and with Jordan for some of those years as well. So it was a good way to get ready to smash 1RMs, which is very different than what I'm doing now. And that's okay. But it's a fun time because you decide that you are going to make 1RMs very important. And so when they go well, you get to be excited. When they don't go well, very disappointed. So you kind of set yourself up for some sort of emotional peak or valley. And that's certainly different when competitions are not on the calendar, like they're not on my calendar anymore, which is fine. It's still super exciting, but I'm really glad I competed. I'm glad what it pushed me to do. I really have a fun memory of my heaviest deadlift that I ever pulled, which was 430 at a charity event down in San Diego where I missed it on my first attempt and I came back and got it on my third attempt. And I probably wouldn't have done that in the gym. And I did it in this tiger onesie. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've definitely come to prefer training by myself for the most part. But there is an undeniable benefit in terms of peak performance to lifting in a crowd or with friends or around a focused event or competition. There's just another gear that comes into play.
Yes. And it gives you permission to max out in that gear. And it's fun.
Ooh, beep.
Yeah, beepity beep. Sorry. I remember the nights before, I would do everything I could to sleep well, and I would rest my body, and I wouldn't hang out with anybody. And I could hardly sleep because I was so excited. And then, driving to the event, you have to make sure you have everything you need from your coach and invite people who you want to be there. And then you go and check in and you do your weight. And there are so many periods throughout the day of trying to really stay calm and control this huge amount of energy that you're just waiting to release because you have to be really selective with when you let that go. And so the huge amount of nervousness, and I'm talking heart racing, sweating when you're not even moving, trying to calmly warm up and not rush through your warm up because you're so hyped. And then getting the first squat attempt was really helpful in terms of calming down to some extent, because then you felt what it was like to be in front of the judges and to get the lights and to practice what it was like to give them your next attempt. And so that was a big moment. And then the other moments were waiting for everybody else to go. You have to incorporate that new dynamic, which thankfully you don't have to do that in an online meet. But then you have to pace yourself through each of the lifts. And then you have to have so much in reserve for your deadlift, which is the heaviest lift. You usually bring it out on the second or third attempt, depending on how you strategize it. And by then you've had sugar and caffeine, and hopefully you've managed your energy well. But the emotion for me going into that time was so much fun because I really just felt like I had full permission to give my deadlift everything I had. And I loved that time. And I enjoyed that with jiu-jitsu too. It was this is all I'm focusing on today, and I don't care about anything else. And I don't feel bad about not caring about anything else.
Thinking about how you got into it, and maybe somebody who's out there trying to figure out whether to try one of the International Barbell Federation meets for the first time. Is there anything that you would offer as wisdom or perspective as to the value of signing up for a meet, as somebody who's either never done online meet or never done a meet at all, or maybe somebody who's done a meet but hasn't done the online one? Because you've also done the online meets before. What are your thoughts on how they compare and their relative experience?
They're certainly different because you don't drive to a venue that's organized by another person. You have a lot more kind of responsibility to manage your day, but you also have so much more freedom to pick a day when it's best for you. So I like that a lot for the online environment.
Jordan has mentioned in the past that gyms, if anybody out there owns a gym or some sort of training space, that they've run a sort of meet or tried to create as close to that environment as possible. So if you can...
a group event to do the online event.
Yes.
For sure.
So if you got 10 people nearby, then you can at least try to tap into a little bit of that energy. It's not the same as having 100 people yelling at you, but
absolutely. I think that'd be fun.
10, that can definitely be
That'd be a blast.
better than just alone in your garage, unless you're somebody who just likes to lift alone in your garage with no music. But.
Unless you really prefer that. Yeah. And I don't think it's always really helpful to compare yourself against other lifters, but it's a challenge to yourself to try something that you haven't done before.
Right.
And there's no losing. There is zero losing in this competition. So if that's a fear in your mind, say goodbye to that. You're only going to come out learning something new about yourself, feeling probably a bit more excited about your training, and have this whole new lens to look through. But there's only interesting things that would come from it.
That's what I really valued about competition. Was the day of was fun. Although I've never really been a guy that really likes game day. I oddly have enjoyed usually the practice more than game day.
You're a collegiate athlete.
Yeah, it was so stressful to me. Like, yeah, every time I would pull up to the race line, I don't know, it was very difficult to enjoy that, honestly. But I kept doing it. And I always thought one of the more interesting parts of it was afterwards, because I inevitably would take something away as an area that I would want to work on next time.
The post-meet drive home and the next 2 days are a challenging time for the lifter and the coach, because the lifter is going to pick apart everything that didn't go the way they had hoped it would go. And for the coach, speaking for myself, but I know everybody in our team, they take a lot of responsibility for how a meet goes for their lifters, and they feel it. Like, even when our lifters are in different states and it's on a Saturday, you are feeling that nervousness and you want your lifter to do so well. And so when it didn't go to plan and meet certain expectations, there's this
It's the worst
time that feels very tumultuous, where you're wondering, like, are they going to fire me? They're going to grill me on what we could have done differently. And that's fine. Like, I think it's a useful thing to do, but it's the come down afterwards is very challenging. I'll say that it's hard.
I, to this day, will randomly think about USSF Nationals in 2021. Maybe it was 2020. Anyways, I was coaching and handling Charity Hambrook, and she was absolutely crushing her training. We'd been working together for a year or two. Everything was clicking. She was hitting lifetime press PRs like crazy.
Huge presses. Yeah.
Squat was going well. Like, everything was perfectly set up. Started warming up and going through the squat. Things are clicking along. I think she missed her second attempt, and we still went up for the third attempt. Like, we took a gamble at a big PR and she got it. And so I was like, I am the best coach ever.
Yeah.
And then we start warming up the press. We picked a easy press weight. It was arguably a little aggressive, but it was, compared to her PR.
It's usually something, the opener is something you've done in training for like 2 or 3 reps.
It was definitely in that ballpark, maybe a little bit aggressive. But with the press, I wanted her to open relatively close. She was going to go for a national press record
Of like 107, I don't know, it was a
I
lot.
think it was like 150, 145, something like that. And missed the opener.
Oh,
Because,
man.
the press is finicky. It's like an Olympic lift with the timing, and especially at the weight that she was lifting. I want to say she opened at 140 or something like that, which she's hit for a triple before, or had at the time. Missed the opener. And, psychology is such a huge component
Yes.
of a meet,
Big time.
that I think that just, again, an opener, I should have just picked something that maybe 135. 135, she would have just absolutely crushed. And it would have just got points on the board and gotten rid of the nerves a little bit. But it was like, once she missed the opener, it was in her head, missed the second attempt, missed the third attempt, bombed out. And to this day, I'll still just randomly...
Ugh. And then you felt like you were
I'm
the worst coach ever.
And to this day, I still carry guilt, and it pops into my head randomly that I screwed up that call. Like, I have not forgiven myself for it yet. But Anywho,
So hard.
yeah, it's tough.
I know, because you decide to make it a very important part of your training, so you can't decide after that it wasn't important.
Right.
Yeah. It's just a chance to learn, and it's neat to do that, though, to decide that something's important and then learn what that does for you on the other side.
Yep.
It's very important to manage expectations and understand everything that goes into preparing for a meet, like sleep and weight management and how you're eating on that day and life stress. Because, if you do a weight cut for a meet, I always thought that is the fourth lift that you have to be really kind of honed in on for weeks and weeks. And that has a lot to do with your performance on the day. And then there's the mental aspect of it, which is, do you get so nervous on the platform that you have to lift lighter than you do in training, or does being on the platform make you come alive? And I found that I'm different in every single lift, all three of them in each of those domains.
Yes, the charity situation was exactly that. I think for the squat, the crowd and the environment amped her up, and she was able to overperform compared to training. The press, there's lighting and there's things moving in front of you.
And there was a lot on the line for her.
Like if you're used to just pressing with a wall in front of you and then pressing in front of an audience. And,
yes. There's a judge right
like
there.
The national setting and the judges. It's like there's a lot of distraction going into a lift that has that kind of a technical timing component. So the press, I think, can be, that one can be a bit of a curveball to try to do on the platform compared to home. And then it's pretty rare I've ever met somebody that doesn't feel like they get like 10 or 15 pounds at least on their deadlift from having a crowd.
For sure.
That one's just like almost a no-brainer that it's going to be heavier than training.
Just keep pulling for 20 seconds. Yeah. And I think one more thought on that is that if you are coaching people or interested in coaching people, do a meet, because you will learn a lot about it.
Well, I was going to say from either perspective, do the meet as a
competitor.
As a competitor, for sure, that's a great experience. And then also, if you haven't coached somebody through a meet, just like our philosophy with learning to coach, you got to start coaching. If you want to learn how to handle people at a meet, start handling people at a meet, and this is a super low stakes way to get that kind of experience as a lifter and as a coach. If you've got 10 or 15 people on your roster or whatever, round them up, pick this as a date that everybody can rally behind. And I think you can have a lot of fun in your gym or in your, whatever your community is. And also just learn a ton as a coach or a client.
Yeah.
It is very different. Just like coaching for the first time, I can remember early on how different it was from a mental model perspective to do an exercise and know how it feels and how you need to adjust to lift more or fix a problem versus seeing somebody else move and feeling like all of those feedback signals that you have to understand what the problems are gone. And you're having to like try to figure out by watching somebody else move what they're thinking or what cue would get them to move in a different way. I think the same is true with a meet, that you kind of have to learn how to pick up on how other people are experiencing that stress or that dynamic. Like, like you said, some people thrive, some people struggle.
And it's very different.
Sometimes it depends on the lift, managing weight leading up to a meet, what energy levels, how to coach somebody through sleeping and eating when they're nervous or they can't sleep or they're tempted to drink like 10 Red Bulls on the day of the meet and just come in completely fried.
And just making sure that they're on the platform because they're going to be peeing a zillion times out of nerves, and especially if they had all those Red Bulls. So going back to the IBF, what do people get when they sign up to register, and what do the winners get?
Yeah, so we are working on the prizes right now. We haven't fully finalized them, but right now what we're leaning towards is having a best open lifter. So this is all genders, weight classes, basically like the heaviest total of the meet would be a Dominion belt.
So it's the heaviest total, or is it like a Wilks score?
Wilks-based total.
Okay. So Wilks score takes into account body weight, right? There's
Correct.
some Wilks coefficient.
Yep.
And there's a different score for masters lifters. Does this one include masters lifters?
If they have the best overall Wilks.
It's for everybody.
It's just like the open category.
Got it.
So by Wilks score, the best lifter, essentially. meaning the heaviest amount total. So that would be either a choice between a Dominion belt or free entry to the next event. Same for the best women's lifter by Wilkes belt or free entry to the next event. Best masters lifter. We're looking at, if you approve this as the leader of Barbell Logic Online Coaching, 2 free months of coaching transferable to friends or family.
Hell yes.
Same for best women's master. And then we also have medals for the top 3 of each category. And then Jordan's bringing what he called the hypertrophy.
That is so much fun. You got to explain this one.
The hypertrophy is the best lift of the meet. So this is usually the one where the judges agree that it was the most like inspiring,
Yes.
the biggest grind, most amazing lift. It doesn't necessarily have to be the heaviest,
No.
but it's the one where you watch it and you're just like, that was insane.
Yeah, I usually am like sitting back in my chair. My eyes are like saucers and just wondering what is going to happen.
They tend to be deadlifts, but I've seen it on others.
I think we've seen a press.
There's been, some presses that can be...
Maybe there's like a 30-second squat or something. It was...
they tend to be very, very long, like 30-second lifts with some amount of helicoptering and veins popping out. And
Yep.
it's just...
What does the winner of the hypertrophy award get?
The winner of the hypertrophy award could also be called the one that overcomes the most adversity, some may say.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Coming into adversity season as football's starting up. That one, the proposal there is a cookie prize package.
Ooh.
But like I said, these are the ones we were kicking around. The medals are definitely going to happen. You can also sign up to get a t-shirt. We're starting out with one that's just a branded International Barbell Federation shirt. Going forward, we'll probably have some specialty designs, but
you will get to compete in the first International Barbell Federation competition.
that's right.
That's pretty freaking cool. Like, there was only going to be one first.
Not to be confused with the IBS. This is the IBF. Ta-dunch.
Same kind of hypertrophy award sometimes. Awesome. So where do they go to learn more?
Go to www.internationalbarbellfederation.com. You will see a registration link there.
There's a meet coming up in October.
And formal rules, which are going to be very similar to what they were if you ever did compete in the USSF. They are going to be similar. We're finalizing and we'll post those shortly. They may actually be already posted by the time this episode releases. And yeah, we'll go from there. That's really where people can get going.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. I hope to see some of my clients sign up. I'm excited to see the Hypertrophy Award, and very cool that we get to have the first ever International Barbell Federation competition happening this year.
Let's go.
Let's go. All right. See you on the flip side. Thanks for listening to Beast Over Burden. Thank you, Andrew.
Bye-bye.